Aloha, I'm Jarrett Walters, President and Chief Operating Officer for Hawaiian Building Maintenance, and thank you for joining us for HBM's Guide for Workforce Reentry. I hope everything finds you guys well as you're watching this during the COVID-19 crisis. There's definitely a lot of things to consider, but here at HBM, we've put a lot of work into coming up with things that we consider really important as people start to reopen. The priorities as we see it is definitely keeping your business in mind, but also making sure that you think about your employees and what a safe and healthy work site looks like. One measure that we did internally that we think is a great thing to follow for other people is constant communication with your customers. We put a lot of work and effort into doing weekly email updates. And what's important about this is when you have good information, you want to make sure that you have the clear documentation so people can always rely on your info. We also have virtual meetings on multiple platforms. Everyone's talking about things like Zoom or FaceTime or Teams, and they're thrown around daily. It's an absolute no-brainer to replace small group activities with virtual meetings, and it's being done with great success. And people are finding that while conference calls can be a little bit stiff and tedious, there's definitely value in getting face-to-face, even if it's over a computer. We've thrived as a company that succeeds because of our people, and we've used existing resources and technology to adapt. Some things to consider is if you have a newsletter, use that to do better transitions and better communication with your employees. For example, one thing we're doing right now is allowing people to broadcast graduation announcements or little small personal victories so that there's an opportunity to be successful together as a team. Sometimes conference call meetings are still necessary if you can't get everybody on Zoom as well. But we try to recommend doing Zooms wherever possible so you can make sure that people can have an interaction and also share documents and data. You need to be able to also tailor your services to meet your customers' needs because sometimes customers want to have a conference call. Other times they like to be in a situation where they can share files or data too. So just be willing to be flexible and adaptable. As we mentioned earlier, communication with your employees on multiple platforms is really key. So whether you're doing your conference calls or if you have pre-existing trainings and meetings, make sure that you have a couple of things in consideration. So if you have to do anything in person or face-to-face, consider using things of a higher level of disinfectant status. So the EPA and CDC and a number of other organizations have got recommendations on COVID-19 level of disinfectants or sanitizers. So if you're going to be face-to-face, make sure that you guys are using the appropriate cleaning measures. Also, please be mindful of proper PPE or personal protective equipment. In our office, when you're in common areas, we have people wearing face masks. If you're using common elements like copy machines or stuff in the kitchen, consider using gloves as well. Redefine your scope on high-touch cleaning for your spaces. So for us, we want to make sure that anything like light switches or those previously mentioned high-touch areas get extra attention throughout the day. Your nighttime cleaners should definitely be attacking those things nightly as well, but you may even want to think about implementing some internal cleaning measures throughout the day to make sure that as people continue to use your space, that you have great cleaning practices taken into consideration as well. We put a lot of work into determining what we think are best practices for us and for many of our clients, but you might find that you're going to have your own custom thing that's important for you and make sure that your partners adapt to that as well. As you're looking at these things, keep an eye on local and nationwide statistics. Currently, right now, we're lucky that Hawaii has been locked down from a tourist standpoint so that there's little outside interaction, so you can really focus on your local statistics. But as things start to ramp up or ramp down, you can also use that communication with your employees to hopefully give them a little bit of comfort. One thing we're noticing definitely in the marketplace right now is that when there are a lot of new infections or new cases, there's heightened sense of anxiety that people are experiencing, whether it's coming to work or even working from home. So being mindful of the environment that you're in, even on a daily basis, is good for knowing how to work with your employees. We've incorporated a lot of lesson learned from webinars to address the staff and answer all their questions and concerns as well. One thing we've seen is that there's a lot of really good resources out there, so put some time into it and make sure that you have different people from different departments trying to gather as much information as possible so that you can bring it back to your team and really put together your own best practice. Now, going with the communication that we're talking about, it's important to think about how you want to best disseminate information across your teams. You might have different departments within your organization and they might have their own information flow. For us, we have internal office memos that our accounting and back-end office staff use to make sure that whether it's letting people into our office spaces or if there's any impact on hours of operation, we keep things clear and concise. And we also have weekly phone calls, conference calls, or Zooms with our field staff. One of those things that we do is make sure that we talk about the state's COVID-19 responses, any updates in field training and procedures, any adjustments to PPE or cleaning inventory, and also things like updated policies or job hazard analyses. As you're going through the COVID-19 pandemic and adjusting your operations, it's really important to think about, does the information that happens today impact my team differently than the information we had yesterday? Definitely through March and April, we were experiencing a lot of changing information on a daily basis. So making sure that you're able to get people together, have good question and answer times, and giving them some sort of a consistent information source is really important. We're seeing a lot of information or misinformation coming in off of social media, which could also add to a lot of workplace anxiety. So being able to be a reasonable and rational source of consistent information and checking with really good sources for your employees can help them feel more at ease, whether it's at work or at home. Now, with Hawaii reopening and looking at bringing people back to work in larger capacity, it's important to look at how you do your staffing plan. Many organizations may look at it similarly to how the state of Hawaii is looking at things from an orange, yellow, or green status. And so as you look at your staffing, think about who is essential for being at work and think about them first. For us, we really try to make sure that we can leverage our teleworking capabilities wherever possible so that people that may have concerns like childcare or aren't quite comfortable coming to the office can work from home. But as you bring people in, think about the needs you might have with social distancing. Think about how you can get people together and how you can make sure that they feel safe to work. And we talked about policies earlier. If you have good policies that address things like, what do you do when you come into the office? How do you disinfect? How do you clean? If you have tight policies and procedures, and trust me, it's a lot of work, but it's worth it in the back end when your employees have their questions answered before they even think to ask them. As you're phasing people in, you might have to do some stuff that you hadn't thought about before. We just moved into our new office building and we love it, but we've had to move one of our conference rooms into a makeshift office for the time being. So because some of the areas didn't have quite enough space for proper social distancing. As you're doing this, you might even consider doing Zoom meetings at the office, even though you're in offices next to each other. If you don't have a conference room space that's big enough to have people comfortably separated, do a Zoom meeting so you're still at work, but you can still have that face-to-face interaction. One thing that we're doing that's going to be kind of neat is we're going to be doing a virtual town hall meeting where people can come in and see our new office space or ask questions and have that semblance of a big 100-person meeting, but having the precautions taken in place to make sure that you're doing it safely. We've looked at things even like our supervisor and manager trainings, different safety walks. So a lot of things that you might do in your business that seem to be hard to do right now, think about how you can incorporate virtual meetings, Zoom, or different technologies to make sure that you can still have that personal interaction that might be very valuable and vital to your company. If you have a clear communication plan of startup and safety procedures, people can definitely know that as you come back to work, you can have a safer and healthier environment. Now, many of you have probably seen the Facebook posts or stories on the news about making your own masks or what you can do with the shortage of effective PPE. One good thing that I've been seeing going out and about is there appears to be more masks available for use, especially since it's part of the state mandate that if you're out and about, you need to be wearing a mask. But what people have also experienced there's major issues with supply chain logistics. The average consumer can't just walk into a store and buy Lysol wipes or sanitizing sprays unless they just get lucky. It's like winning a lottery these days. The same issue could also apply to building service contractors or your office staff as well. Our approach to this is to be really proactive with how we approach it. And we're buying months worth of equipment and supplies, not in a hoarding capacity, but buying things like instead of using RTU cleaning products or ready to use, we're trying to buy things in concentrate. We know that when there's certain chemicals that we use for cleaning and that come off the shelves, we need to be proactive with making sure there's replacement chemicals as well. A lot of people definitely have a focus on those EPA approved products. So as such, we've got a pretty good backstock right now to make sure we can continue servicing our clients, even if there are future shortages. One thing you might want to consider as you're doing this is making sure that your cleaning staff or your building knows that it's important to be using things that are certified biocides. And the EPA has good information on all that. One of those things that we experienced over the past few years is really buildings focusing on green cleaning. If your building was really heavily focused on green cleaning, which in any normal situation we recommend, you might want to make sure that they're considering doing heavier biocidal cleaning. We're seeing everybody doing a pretty good job of adhering to that, but green cleaning chemicals right now don't seem to be doing the trick with regards to killing COVID-19. PPE and supplies, make sure you get them to all of your frontline workers. If you can add hand sanitizing stations in common areas, that's a great thing to do as well. But remember, if there's nothing else you can do, make sure that people have access to soap and water, because the CDC does believe that effective hand washing for 20 seconds, getting all areas of the hands, is just as effective as using your hand sanitizer, in fact, more so. So effective hand washing, proper use of PPE, and just general courtesy with regards to following the CDC guidelines is really important. How do you keep your workplace safe and healthy? As we were talking about in the previous slide, wash your hands. While the CDC had made mention recently that COVID-19 doesn't last on surfaces as long as previously thought, it's important to make sure that your staff is constantly washing their hands whenever using common elements. Other things to consider include making sure you have increased space and traffic flow. If you can keep people in that 6-foot distance away with proper PPE, you're in a much more protective environment than if you have people crammed together in cubicles or having a lot of face-to-face interaction without having any sort of access to PPE. If your office has the ability to create a staggered schedule, use it. For us, we try to make sure that we have people in on certain days of the week based on operational need. If there's ever need to put people in the office together in a situation where there's more people than space, we utilize other areas like our conference room or kitchen to be workspaces as well. So there's ways to be creative if you have to. Not everybody has a big office, so whether you're staggering hours or days, there's a way to make sure that your people can come to work in a manner that's safe for them. Create visible signage for employees, visitors, and customers as well. One of the things that was important to us when we were creating our office space was to have a welcoming lobby with nice furniture. Well, as fun as that is, now we don't want people touching it, unfortunately. So as visitors come into our office space through appointments now, we don't want to have everybody wandering in and out without any purpose or reason. We want to make sure that all of our couches are marked with signs that say, due to social distancing, use of this furniture is unauthorized. Or better yet, you feel free to remove some of those common area furniture elements. You might have seen in some of the malls or stores that people have taken away benches or tables. So if there's areas where people congregate, you do have the option to remove furniture to make sure that people can't congregate in areas where you feel unsafe. It's really important to think of best practices as a living document. So when you go about setting up your approach and your policy, step one is you definitely want to make sure that you visit really reputable sites. EPA, CDC, World Health Organization, your state and local government. Some people might have alternate beliefs about how infectious or effective COVID is. However, the safest thing you can always do is rely on the guidelines that are set forth for you by the government. Make sure that you have health screening certifications or protocols. So for us, if anybody wants to come in the office, they have a non-contact thermometer that makes sure that they're safe and clear to come into work. There's also a hand sanitizing station at the front desk and through most of the corridors really too. Make sure that you have employee schedules of cleaning and disinfecting policies and procedures. We've even given all of our employees cleaning products for their workspaces to make sure that if there's anything that they touch or need to have cleaned, that they have access to cleaning chemicals. For many of your office spaces, you may not have the janitors coming in until later that night. So having access for your staff to do their own disinfecting, especially if they're ever concerned that there was someone in the space, is really important. Make sure that you're clear on employee safety and travel protocol. For all of our employees, if they do leave the state, as is mandated, they have a 14-day quarantine period upon returning to work. We'd actually put that policy in place before the state policy came out too, because we thought that was just important. One thing to consider is if you either have essential vendors or people coming in or contractors, adhere to them the same level of screening that you do your employees, or perhaps even more stringent. We make all of the contractors that come into our space answer a questionnaire prior to access so that we know that they've been following all of the appropriate safety protocols. Make sure that them or no one in their family have been sick, make sure that them or no one in their family have been traveling, and do what you can to make sure that you limit access to your space to people where you can't contact trace. Whether it's your employees, visitors, or your customer safety guidelines, just make sure that you keep in mind of what the best practices are today, but be willing to be flexible. The other day, there was a lot of things about, gathering at the beach, and you can't do that. Now as things start to open up, your best practices are going to have to be a little bit more flexible to accommodate things like increased mall hours if you're a retail center, or if you're an office place, more people might be wanting to come back to work. So look at your situations and your surroundings and make sure that you're aware of what you might be encountering on a day-to-day basis. I've been very impressed with the CDC and World Health Organization's resources, as well as things like OSHA, HIOSH as well. So if you don't know or you need a resource, Google's been a great friend to us. So look up your authorities, get information, or reach out to your building managers or your building service contractors, or give me a call if you have any questions. Call our main office line at 537-4561, or feel free to call me directly at 808-265-4458, or reach me via email at jarrett.walters@hbmhawaii.com. Thank you for your time and your attention. I hope all of you guys continue to be safe and healthy. I hope some of this information was helpful for you, and that I hope that as we open up, you open up safely as well. Best of luck, everybody. Be safe.